Those who have been to a ruined wedding, what happened? It was a big wedding. Over 300 people. Turns out the bride had been having an affair with her cousin's husband. The cousin had known for a little bit, but waited until the wedding to go table to table letting everyone know the bride was sleeping with her husband. Poor groom was blindsided. Worst part was his father-in-law was well off and opened up a restaurant for him. Well, he lost his wife and his restaurant. The bride's father was 45 minutes late to walk his daughter down the aisle. While we were waiting, the air conditioning broke in the venue. It was over 100 degrees outside and humid AF. The place was overcrowded. You could barely move without bumping into someone else, and in the heat that was extra miserable. I guess the air conditioning problem had also affected the refrigeration or something, because most of the food was spoiled. The only food on the buffet was salad, spaghetti and rolls. Not enough to feed even half the guests. Most people left after the first dance. 2 of the bride's aunts fainted. The bride and the wedding planner were crying. The wedding was at a state park that's famous for its giant gorge waterfall. I don't know whose idea this was, but someone suggested a photo overlooking this gorge and everybody was game. The wedding party went around a stone security barrier and the maid of honor literally fell off the cliff to her death. It was like 500+ feet. I went to a wedding where the bride and groom bought the wedding package on Groupon. Which is fine. Why spend a fortune for one day? But I guess the venue thought they could cut some corners. So they stuck us in a room that smelled so strongly of cat urine some people immediately left. The only drinks were those from a vending machine. It was next to an airport, so every time a plane took off the ceremony had to be paused because you couldn't hear anything. And the day after the event, every single one of us had food poisoning. Edit. Bonus story, because even though it didn't ruin the wedding for the couple, it ruined it for the bridal party. I was a bridesmaid for my friend. Flew across the world for over 10 hours to be there. Had to do the setup of the venue. Assign people to rooms. Put signs on doors. Finish the seating chart. Transport food. Redo her bouquet because she didn't like it. Etc. etc. The whole time she's rude and tells everyone within earshot that the bridesmaids aren't helping. Her maid of honor was absolutely bending over backwards trying to keep her happy, and instead of being grateful, she instead told her sister, "I should have asked you to be my maid of honor." Instead, she was pretty cold to me and kept asking if I'd lost weight. I said yes because I had been ill but didn't think much of it. At the reception, her new husband takes the opportunity to read the speech she clearly wrote for him. To say to me, "We are so glad you fit into your dress." In front of over 100 people. I don't speak to her anymore, and neither does her maid of honor or other bridesmaid. Went to a co-worker's wedding about 15 years ago, and this technically happened at the reception. It was a beautiful outdoor venue overlooking a lake. Anyways, the groom had planned to sing a song to his new wife and have fireworks launch as he was singing the last note. Well, that last note came, but the fireworks did not. He held that last note for a good 10 seconds before he finally yelled, "Motherfuckers!" Quote. Threw the mic down and ran to go fight the fireworks guy. No fists were thrown, but somebody did end up in the lake. The party kinda broke up after that. They also ended up getting a divorce about a year later after the groom got fired from his job for showing his dick to his boss's underage daughter. This was one I worked at. After the ceremony, right at the start of the reception, photographer was taking jumping photos of the bride and bridesmaids. So they were all jumping in the air while wearing heels. Bride landed and dislocated her knee. Then passed out and kept going in and out of consciousness. We called an ambulance who turned up and fixed her knee etc. But she wanted to continue with the wedding. She then had the first course of the meal and threw up down her dress. And had to sit with her mum in another room while everyone else danced etc. Felt so bad for her as she spent the rest of the evening crying. Hurricane Ivan. Our wedding was scheduled for Friday and the hurricane hit us dead center on Thursday. We were sitting around with no power on Friday and remembered that a neighbor was a pastor. So my partner and I just knocked on his front door and asked if he would just marry us in the front yard. So the big church wedding was cancelled, but instead I got married in the front yard with chainsaws and stuff in the background. Been married 17 years now. We attended a wedding for family member who didn't have a lot of money. It was hosted at an inexpensive venue but was nice. My heart broke when only a third of the people invited showed up. You could see the hurt in the couple's face. They came up to our table and said, "Do you have any friends in city?" We lived an hour away. They had all this food for 100 people but only 30 guests. They were willing to have complete strangers come down just so their money and food wouldn't go to waste. We hadn't handed over our card with cash inside yet, so my husband hit the ATM and added another $100. Think I missed the boat here. But I worked at a catering hall after college, and a night I call chaos at the dais will forever be in my mind. Nighttime. Wedding. Everything is going as planned. As captain, I took my post outside the kitchen doors during best man, maid of honor speeches. Best man comes up and starts giving his speech and begins talking about how the bride really stepped up and changed her ways in order to land the groom. He acknowledged that it took a lot from her to get to where she needed to be. Thought it was weird. But the speech ended. The dancing started. I got back in the kitchen. And we began getting dinner served. I came out and see a huge crowd at the dais. I'm wondering what's going on when I start to see fists getting thrown, with the best man as the center point. My manager and a few guests picked him up and dragged him out the doors to the lobby while his attackers were pulled back from family members. 15 minutes later, the groom took the mic on the dance floor, holding his wife's hand, and said that it was inevitable. Apparently, the best man wasn't a fan of the bride because she had a history of sleeping around. The groom had his uncle, a reverend, come up and say a blessing, perform an exorcism. Devil, leave this wedding in peace. I command you. Devil. Quote. Which was wild. The bride told the maidard to serve cake and wrap it up 2 hours early. The staff was pumped to get out so early. But fuck, I felt so bad for the bride. That night is ruined. Those relationships are ruined. This special moment is forever ruined. Weeks later, I met a guy from my other job who happens to frequent the restaurant bar attached to the catering hall. He goes, "Hey, what happened a few weeks ago?" It was like Friday night and I'm pulling in and there were like 5 people in wedding attire in the middle of the road trying to calm some tall guy down. The groom's father groped both the bride and his daughter, my then girlfriend, multiple times each, ended up getting punched out by his son, and locked in a minivan for a few hours until he sobered up. Bride and groom plan wedding at Caribbean Island Resort. Friends and family booked their trip. Groom caught cheating a week before wedding. Wedding called off. It was too late to cancel trip to get refunds. So mostly everyone, including the bride, went to the Caribbean Island Resort. The groom did not go, but his family and friends did to go, and they supported to the bride. Everyone put on a brave face, trying to have a good time. There was an air of sadness about the whole thing behind fake smiles. Looking back at the group pictures that were taken as heartbreaking. The bride stopped near all contact with her friends and family. To this day, years later, after the trip, I think a part of her died from this experience. A couple of years back, I was waitressing at this function lounge that was hosting the reception. The music starts, but nobody comes in for a solid 30 seconds, so the DJ cuts the music. Everyone hears loud arguing in the foyer for about a minute when two men come stumbling into the hall, absolutely fighting each other bloody. It was the groom and the bride's brother. Turns out the groom's side of the family didn't want him marrying the girl, and the groom decided at the reception that he agreed with his family. Long story short, more people got involved with the fighting. Police got called. Bride was understandably a crying mess, but she decided that if she spent so much money on the event, then they were going to have a party with or without the groom. Honestly, she was so much stronger than I could have ever been, so good on her for that, but the whole thing was an absolute mess. Father of the bride died suddenly 3 days before the wedding. Pre-COVID. Daddy-daughter dance was mom, bride, and picture of dad. Same with walking down the aisle to give her away. Lots of tears. Not many smiles. Even the bartender at the hotel knew the night before and was talking about it with me. $28,000 wedding paid for by the father of the bride. Groom gets alcohol poisoning and goes to the hospital 30 minutes before. Not a happy papa. But there was plenty of extra $600 birthday cake. A coworker was at one of best friend's wedding. There were very specific rules about the food, no nuts. There were a couple people there, including the maid of honor, who were severely allergic. The venue served something that had nuts. Maid of honor went anaphylactic. EpiPen was not effective, and she died on the way to the hospital. Needless to say, there are lawsuits abound. A fight broke out between father of the bride, brother of the bride, and some guy that just happened to be staying at the hotel. In reality, I don't know how much of a fight it was. More just the dad and brother assaulting some man. So anyway, they were both arrested. Cut to the bride sobbing at breakfast because her dad and brother spent the evening of her wedding in jail and now face assault charges for what they did to this poor man. My dad has vintage and veteran cars. When I was younger, he used to do some weddings with them. I loved clearing out the confetti from the car when he'd get home. One week he arrived back and there was no confetti in the car. On the way to the church, the bride changed her mind, and instead of taking her and her father to church, they asked if he could drop them at the local zoo, as it's her favorite place. So he did. Left them there in full wedding attire. They were going to get a taxi home when they were done. It was the days before mobile phones too, so I'm guessing PPL were waiting at the church for quite a while. Edit: veteran cars are made before 1919, vintage 1919 to 1930. Also, I've just called my dad to ask him if he remembers this, and he seems to think, from what he could overhear, that she was only getting married because she was pregnant and thought she had to. Was early 80s. He also told me he did 2 weddings where the groom never showed up. The groom caught the bride in the toilets with another guy at the reception. He forgave her, but after 2 months or so he caught her again with another guy. A third one. My own. It rained and was cold. No one bothered to turn the lights on, so the few pictures I have are dark and grainy. My parents divorced earlier that year, so my dad hated seeing mom for the first time and didn't stick around to get a picture with me. My husband's mom didn't even take off work to attend. Apparently, the money was more important. Good news is that we just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary. The poor bride started her menstrual cycle on her big day. And she was nauseated and in pain all day. She couldn't eat any of the buffet because her stomach hurt too much. And anything she tried to eat ended up being vomited back up. She couldn't even stand properly either because of her cramps. She stayed seated. In most of the wedding photos, she's grimacing instead of smiling because she was so ill.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.